literally all of these lenses that we're talking about today have one fatal flaw. It doesn't matter which brand it's coming from. It could be Tamron, Sigma, Sony even, doesn't matter. They all have one flaw and I'm sick of it. Sony, please make this lens that I'm going to be talking about in this video. Now, this is a pain that I know no matter what kind of content creator that you are, you run into this problem and you've ran into it before. And if you're an active content creator, you're traveling, you're vlogging, you're documenting your journey, you're capturing your talks, hashtag all the things, you have already run into this issue. And when I say it, you're going to be right on board with me. I know it. So I'm sure you're saying, Dinah, please, what is it? Stop dragging the point. And I will, right after a message from our local plane. Don't put any of that in. You just cut it out. You're probably going to leave it in because I said cut it. Whatever. Do what you want to do. Alright, so without dragging this on any further, it is lens stabilization, optical steady shot. It's when you look at the lens, especially the Sony lenses, that says OSS, optical steady shot. Not one single third-party lens manufacturer, and I'm guessing this is only because Sony can do this, has stabilization built into the lens. No matter what brand, no matter who it is, they all just make incredible lenses, can I speak English? And it can be sharp, it can be fast, f1.8, f1.4, doesn't matter. They make amazing lenses from Tamron, Sigma, Rokinon, doesn't matter. They all do a great job. None of them have stabilization, and I'm sick of not having stabilization in certain lenses. And this is only a problem for a few select users, and I say few as in like the global populace of us that use Sony APS-C cameras versus full frame versus other brands and the like. And this is honestly a kind of a problem across other brands as well. A little bit less as we start to get more brands doing digital stabilization, but for APS-C, Sony cameras, the only cameras that have IBIS are the a6600 and the brand new Sony FX30. The fact that you want stabilization in the camera is going to bump up the price a little bit, but I honestly think we're at a point universally IBIS should just kind of like be a thing, or if you're not going to do it, have like excellent digital stabilization that works with the optical steady shot in the lens, like we've seen with Olympus before they shut down, and Panasonic with their new camera that looks really interesting. That they've been doing that for a long time, and they actually have a good combination between the two. Even like Canon has done a great job with it, and Nikon, I think honestly is like the sleeping giant for a lot of this stuff. They're doing a great job with their digital stab as well. But for a lot of older Sony creators, we've had your cameras for a while, the a6600 is getting a little long in the tooth. It is 4 years old. It will be in like a few months. That's a long time considering Sony used to be dropping a brand new camera every 6 to 8 months, and lenses were just a constant thing. And it doesn't get exciting until you really understand the importance of lenses, which I'm not going to go into, but the better lenses you have, the more that you get better performance out of your camera, or really, gives it a breath fresh of life. Kind of like when the Sigma 16 came over to the Canon EFM line, breath of fresh air to that whole lineup. Now, unfortunately, Canon did kind of like discontinue it a little bit, but they're still great cameras. They're still great lenses that you can pick up. And honestly, for a lot of people, they probably won't need to upgrade from for quite a while. Now, the only hope that we have of getting IBIS outside of the brand new FX30, that's an amazing camera. For some people, that's still a bit of a stretch, $1,200, $1,300, $1,700. When you add on lenses and stuff like that, it can get into the $2,000 plus. And depending on the creator, that's still cheap compared to other stuff. And again, you have to look at the whole lineup, other options for that to make sense. But when you're in the sub $1,700 to $1,000, even it could be $1,200 or something like that, that sweet spot, those are the cameras that don't tend to have IBIS, so a6600 was a big deal. But unless we're going to get the fabled a7000 or an a6800 or whatever to kind of upgrade this whole camera setup, or 6700 I guess, we need IBIS in more than just the FX30 and a6600, and it needs to be better performing, because I want to see something like some Olympus level stabilization or Panasonic even level stabilization. Now, I know Sony has done a really great job with the a7S III. You got the other cameras, a7 IV, they're doing way better. Maybe they'll drop an a7 V that is what everyone thought the a7 IV would be, which is not a bad camera. It isn't wowing you initially with the spec sheet like people thought. Those lenses like the 15G that they came out with, the 11mm f1.4 or f1.8 lens that Sony came out with, those are great, because once you go into crop mode, it goes into APS-C mode or what have you. Those lenses, perfect combination. You got IBIS, it works great. But here's what not a lot of creators either realize: if you don't have these lenses or cameras and you're looking to upgrade, that you're probably going to run into that you just aren't aware of. And we got a lens like the Sigma 16 here. This is a fantastic lens, easily my favorite, one of my favorite lenses that I use on a regular and weekly basis. But when you take a lens like this, or the Sony 11mm f1.8 lens, and you put that non-OSS lens on a full frame camera or APS-C camera, it doesn't matter. If that lens does not have stabilization and the camera does not have IBIS, you have no stabilization resources that you can use that won't crop in even more. Meaning standard stabilization doesn't work. You have to have active stabilization or it just is completely off. So when you're using it, you either need to have a gimbal or you need to use active, and you can still use Catalyst browse, Sony Catalyst browse, or you can just have it completely off. Yes, it will be shaky footage, but you can fix it in post with Catalyst browse. But the problem with that is a pain to keep doing over and over and over again, and it eats into your post-processing time, and it just winds up being really long, and you have to carve out extra time to do it. It's just a little annoying. Now granted, you can use the 10 to 18 f4 lens. I have that lens. I use it a ton, but again, you can't use some of these amazing lenses like Sigma 18 to 50, f2.8, the Tamron 11 to 20 millimeter, or like the Samyang 12 millimeter f2 lens I'm using right now. You can't use any of these lenses and still have an in-camera stabilization. I would love to see standard be able to be turned on, because then you at least would have something, but that active stabilization crop is just, it's not where it's at. It's not terrible, but it's also not best. So this is what you're looking at with an active stabilization crop. Now granted, I'm at a 12 millimeter focal length, wider than the 16, which is usually plenty wide for me. We even usually crop in a little bit more, but this is how much, even at an arm's length, like I literally could reach to the back of the camera with no fuss. This is quite a bit of a crop, and this is not great when you're moving around. Just trust me, I'm telling you, you get the warpy stuff. It looks like the image is ripped from the corners or something. It's wobbly, it's shaky. Don't do it. So here's the dream lens. I think if Sony made fixes a lot of these issues, whether you have a camera that has IBIS, which I think past the point all cameras will have some base level IBIS in it or something, it's like time for it. Like, remember when cameras didn't have 4K, it was like, oh, this camera has 4K, this one doesn't. Maybe you came after the fact, but that used to be a thing. Or headphone ports is now like the thing that everybody's adding to cameras. I think IBIS is going to become that standard level thing that all cameras have universally, versus it being like a premium feature or something. So if Sony made a 12 millimeter to 35 millimeter f2.8 optical steady shot lens, okay, Bee's Knees Hall of Fame is what I'm talking about here. This would be the ideal focal length. You have 12 millimeters, what you're seeing right now, 12, that can go to 35. That helps with any zoom issues or whatever you want. So the Tamron 11 to 20 f2 gives them a little bit of a run for their money because it doesn't have OSS, but it's still a great lens. But yes, that 1 millimeter difference won't be a big deal. And it's a little bit longer on the back end. That makes it great when you're doing like B-roll shots, like I was recently doing a shoot at a coffee shop, Rebel 77 out in Spokane, Washington, with the incredible Ray Edwards at a mastermind, which was so awesome. But when I switched to the 35, it's because I want that different look. It won't be exactly the same, but it still will be good instead of it being too wide. Like when you try to zoom in with the 10 to 18, it's not the same as with a prime lens, but that's beside the point. But Panasonic has a 12 to 35 f2.8 lens that has all this stuff. It's not that big, it's not that heavy, and yes, equivalent talking, it's a different focal length. We don't care about equivalence over here. Who cares? But I think a 12 to 35 f2.8 APS-C, build out that with OSS, that, my friends, is the Bee's Knees Hall of Fame Lens Award of the Year. And yeah, you got the 16 to 70 f4 Zeiss lens that Sony has, as well as the, 16 to 55 f2.8 G lens. And that lens was interesting, but literally because it doesn't have OSS, not as many people grabbed that lens, I think, that would if it had it. I just think this is like a solution to the whole thing. But it doesn't need to be a G lens. It just needs to be a lens that exists in the Sony APS-C lineup, because unless it's a third party, it's like we're not getting as many lenses to really complete what we need. And 12 to 35 would be the perfect travel camera. And the video that I was doing on how to get your setup good for outdoors, things that you need that would make it just super sweet when you're traveling but not have to carry a ton of stuff, I'll link to that video in the information card above. The thing is, is this. I don't want to carry like 2 and 3 different lenses. I'm very selective with how much weight I'm carrying, because when you start to add on a bunch of beefy lenses, camera bodies usually aren't too heavy. It just gets to be like a 30, 40, 50 pound bag. And the way I know my bags are heavy when I'm traveling, especially when I'm carrying a ton of camera gear, is anytime some male tries to help me put it in the overhead bin and they're like, oh, you want some help? I'm like, yes, sir, you absolutely can carry this heavy bag, because I don't want to. And you see them struggle just like, ugh. And they're like, whoo, what you got in there, bricks? So yeah, I do. Anytime I see a grown 6'4" muscle-bound man struggle to pick up a camera bag, we need to work on this, okay? I'm not doing the Peter McCormick 50-pound bag. I love Peter McCormick, but I'm not about that life. So if these new rumored Sony cameras, which I don't think these will be rumors for too much longer, the Sony a7C Mark II comes out, maybe some other high-end camera comes out, whatever it might be, I still think like the a6600 needs an upgrade. The ZVE10 needs like a Mark II that's like higher up, but they're going to keep that same body style. Like, that's fine. This can be more of the entry level, really good, really polished camera that works, but give us a version with like IBIS and a few other things. It doesn't have to be as excellent as the FX30, but nobody's gonna complain if you throw us a few features that's like a ZVE10 Mark II. But I'm curious, if you could have your dream lens camera setup that maybe doesn't exist yet, what would it be? Let me know down in the comments. I actually talk a lot about cameras and lenses, not a ton, but we got about 5 chapters that breaks down the best way to actually buy your gear so you don't wind up wasting your money, what to get, how to build out your kit. Even if you are already experiencing stuff, so there's some stuff in here I know you're gonna need. This is the proof. But guess what? Check that out right there. You see that? Forward by Ray Edwards. Yes, the incredible Ray Edwards is doing the forward for my book, The One Right Video, and the future me is actually going to tell you a little bit more about the book. Roll the clip. Are you an entrepreneur struggling to get your brand noticed through video content? Look no further. The One Right Video is the ultimate guide to creating videos that will amplify your brand and grow your business. It's jam-packed with practical tips and strategies to help entrepreneurs just like you succeed in video content creation. Don't let your competition get ahead. Mark your calendar for March 1st and be among the first to get your hands on a copy of The One Right Video. Go to onerightvideo.com.